99% of the movies out there are wasting a giant opportunity with an important aspect of their film. And it's so simple, I can't believe that more movies aren't using it. I'm talking about the title card. It's become this afterthought, something randomly thrown on screen near the beginning of the movie. But what about the magic of the late title card? I don't mean Christopher Nolan just dropping the title of the film at the end of the movie, before the credits roll. I'm talking about the movies that have the sheer audacity to drop its title card deep into the middle of its story, calling attention to itself and defying convention. So many films utilize the late title card, from Marvel, James Bond, Mission Impossible, to the weirdest mindfuck movies you've never heard of. Let's do a deep dive into all of them, breaking down why they work and why directors use them. Just a quick note, I released these two-part late title card videos a few years back. Here I'm combining them into one massive video, but I'm also adding a third part at the end, with some new examples that I missed the first time, and some other examples that have come out in the years since those two other videos came out. So you can enjoy it all for the first time, rewatch it all, or you can just click to that third part if you want. There was a lot of talk this past year surrounding the Japanese film Drive My Car, and deservedly so. It's a 3-hour film about art, the creative process, grief, relationships, and regrets that would eventually go on to win the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film.
Drive My Car, Japan!
And that's all great, but honestly, I don't care about any of that right now, because I'm here to talk about what's maybe my favorite aspect of Drive My Car. The one aspect that's not mentioned first when talking about the film, but one that I've seen lots of people rave about online, especially from nerdy cinephiles. And it's that after a lengthy Act 1, where the characters, world, conflict, and tone of the story are established, the narrative shifts in a major way. And only then, 41 minutes into the film, the opening credits finally appear on screen. 41 minutes. Now, I love this kind of stuff in movies. But besides being obviously awesome and so damn cool, why did director Ryusuke Hamaguchi do this? What's the purpose? Well, let's back up a little bit. At its most basic, a title card and credits give the audience information. You have the title of the film, and the cast, crew, and production companies involved. Now, some directors may choose to put the title up front, or tack it on at the end like an afterthought. Maybe they don't want it to distract. It can easily pull the audience out of the story world and remind them that they're watching a movie. Christopher Nolan is known for opening or closing most of his films on title, and with the types of films he makes, with their unique and innovative worlds, I guess it makes sense that he wouldn't want to pull the audience out of that. Some directors may even skip the credit sequence altogether, and I think that's because a lot of directors see it as this necessary nuisance. For instance, in the film Apocalypse Now, director Francis Ford Coppola didn't want a title card or opening credit sequence, but apparently he was told that the film couldn't be copyrighted as Apocalypse Now unless the title was seen somewhere in the film.
An interesting thing, in my conception for Apocalypse Now, I wanted it to have no credits, no names and credits on it and stuff, and I didn't. When the film came out, there was just a program, but there was no credit sequences on the picture, but it had to have the word Apocalypse Now with a copyright sign on it so that it would be copywritten. And you'll notice on the wall it says our motto, Apocalypse Now. That is for legal purposes because there were no credits.
I've never understood the fear of waking your audience up to the fact that they're sitting in a chair and watching a movie. Of course they know that. For me, I love loud directors that leave massive footprints and remind me that they're there. Directors who wildly move the camera, the long, uninterrupted tracking shot, needle drop moments. I love that stuff. These are the tools to help tell your story in a unique way. Instead of being embarrassed about the title card or trying to avoid it, my favorite directors usually embrace it as another tool to their advantage. Consider the formal implications of placing the opening credits at this moment. They offer a clear boundary between Drive My Car's prelude and the remaining action, allowing the film to seamlessly pass through 2 years of time. So much of the story hinges on our understanding and experience of what transpires in those first 40 minutes. The opening credits leave room for needed pause and reflection. And perhaps most beautifully, the choice to roll the credits at the 40-minute mark draws attention to the length of the film itself. When the credits drop, it's as if Hamaguchi is saying, "Here is my film the way I want it. Haters be damned." The placement of the opening credits at that moment allows us to feel the intentional craft of Hamaguchi as a filmmaker. I like that term, intentional craft, because that's exactly what it is. Taking a tool at your disposal and wielding it in a deliberate way for a specific purpose. And when directors like Hamaguchi drop a title card or title sequence late in their film, you can bet there's a specific purpose to them breaking convention. It's another example of a loud director waking the audience up and making them listen to what they're trying to say. As the opening credits appear 40 minutes into this film, the viewer may realize that not everything is as it seems. In director Rasuke Hamaguchi's hands, the delayed appearance of something as simple as a title card, a common feature in the beginning of films, pivots the viewer into a different kind of movie experience. The title card's placement denotes that everything before it was merely preamble, and that there is much more coming in this 180-minute runtime. The film moves at its own pace, it decides how much time is enough to convey its message, and miraculously, for a movie this long, it is never wrong with its decision. The movie is not a race to the finish, nor is it a road trip where you ask, "Are we there yet?" every 5 minutes. It's a smooth coast along a scenic road, driven by the hands of someone you immediately put your trust in. So we've seen how and why Hamaguchi used a late title sequence in Drive My Car, but now let's go wider and explore other films that have utilized the late title card and title sequence and try our best to categorize the intended purpose for each. First, I want to clarify the difference between a title card and a title sequence. A title card is just the title of the movie itself, whereas the title sequence includes other information like the cast and crew. The title sequence could include the title card, but it doesn't always. For instance, in Drive My Car, it's only the cast and crew that appear at the 40-minute mark, but the title card doesn't appear until the movie is over. For the purposes of this video, and to simplify things, I'm just gonna lump them together. So if I give the wrong term at the wrong time, please feel free to leave me a comment below that I will immediately ignore. Second, I want to reiterate that I'm only considering title information that appears somewhere in the middle of the film, not at the close of the film, like the Christopher Nolan films I mentioned, or, for example, Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. After a lot of research, I think the late title card generally falls into two main categories: prologue and the turn. Let's start with prologue. The prologue is used in order to establish the context of the story, giving background details and other miscellaneous information that the audience needs before the main story begins. The prologue comes at the very beginning of a film, separated from the main story, and the late title card is used here to reinforce that divide. It tells the audience that the prologue is over and the main story is now beginning. As I said, the prologue is giving the audience expository information, and that information usually falls into one or sometimes several subcategories: characters, world, conflict, tone, and lastly, action. Trainspotting drops you right onto the streets of Edinburgh, Scotland, and it's all through the lens of our cast of characters, especially Mark Renton, who narrates and talks us through his perspectives on life and heroin.
I chose not to choose life. I chose something else.
As we meet each main character, we see their personality traits through a game of soccer, or football if you're not an American swine, and each of their introductions is met with on-screen text of their name. We then get glimpses at their relationships and interests, like Sick Boy's obsession with James Bond, and we also get a glimpse at Mark's battle with heroin, which will become a through line throughout the entire film, when he says he's going to stop,
Never again, Swanee, I'm off the skag.
but then immediately confesses that of course he'll have more. And all of that happens in the first 6 minutes of the film before the title card finally appears. Trainspotting 2 actually has a similar intro, quickly catching us up on all the lives of our four main characters, where they've been and where they're at now 20 years after the first film, before the title card comes in at around 9 minutes. The A-Team from 2010 has the same approach of introducing us to each member of the team, showing us how they're coming together, giving us glimpses of their background and personalities, with accompanied on-screen text of their names, all before the title eventually appears 21 minutes into the film.
This is not gonna taste good.
Now, these 3 films are an example of how to showcase an ensemble one piece at a time, showcasing who they are alone and who they are together. But the prologue can also be used to highlight just the main character, like Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network. Just through a simple conversation at a bar, we quickly understand everything we need to know about Mark.
You have finals clubs, OCD, and you need to see someone about it who will prescribe you some sort of medication. You don't care if the side effects may include blindness.
Final clubs, not finals clubs.
His intelligence, arrogance, insecurities.
You're gonna go through life thinking that girls don't like you because you're a nerd. It'll be because you're an asshole.
But the scene also gives Mark the motivation and fire for everything he's about to become and everything he's about to do in the rest of the film. A prologue that focuses on the setting in which our story takes place is important for a few main reasons. It can offer motivation for our characters, like in Hell or High Water, where we see a little spray paint on the wall and closing signs on nearby buildings that hint at the desperation bubbling underneath these West Texas desert towns. In Hugo, we're shown a unique world of 1930s Paris, where a boy lives inside a railway station. We see the inhabitants of the station through Hugo's peering eyes, like the shop owners and the station inspector. Scorsese uses long sweeping shots to show us every nook and cranny, every gear and cog inside this unique and magical world in which Hugo lives. On a side note, this doesn't really matter when you watch the film at home now, but when I watched it in theaters in its native 3D, Scorsese used the camera and sweeping movements to quickly get the audience accustomed to the 3D world they were about to watch for 2 hours. Probably still the best film I've ever seen in 3D. Sometimes the prologue can be purely expositional, used to catch the audience up on the world they're about to be dropped into. The Fellowship of the Ring is an excellent example of this. The prologue carries the audience through the history of Middle-earth, elves, dwarves, men, the forging of the rings, and the looming villain of Sauron, and the master ring he created, a ring that controls all others, its weight, power, and the ability to corrupt. And we then see the path of this ring, from Sauron to Isildur to Gollum, and eventually to Bilbo Baggins, all before the title appears 7 minutes into the film. 8 minutes if you're watching the extended version. Another example is 28 Days Later, where we're shown the origins of the rage virus, how it was created, and what it's capable of before it's unleashed on London. Another element that 28 Days Later does really well is it quickly establishes the rules of this world.
They're highly contagious. They've been given an inhibitor.
Infected with what?
Rage.
It tells us how the virus is spread and how quickly it affects the victim. It's a terrifying hint of what's to come. And that's a vital aspect in films with unique worlds, especially in sci-fi, fantasy, or horror films that have specific rules and dynamics that the audience needs to understand. Pacific Rim uses the prologue to establish a world where kaijus emerge from beneath the Pacific Ocean to terrorize the planet, and how humans have bonded together to create Jaegers in order to battle them. And in Mad Max Fury Road, we're shown the desert wasteland of post-apocalyptic Australia, the creatures that inhabit such a hellish place, and what it takes to survive there. We're shown the infrastructures in place, like the vehicles they use to get around, and the caverns where the war boys take their captives to mark and label them for their resources. A prologue focused on conflict could also be referred to as the inciting incident, which is basically the event that launches the main character on their journey, which will take place throughout the narrative. This is usually through the introduction of the story's main villain or antagonist. In Rogue One, Jyn watches as her mother is killed and her father is captured by Orson Krennic and other members of the Empire. Streets of Fire has rock star Ellen Aim kidnapped on stage by the notorious biker gang known as the Bombers. In Zodiac, we get our first introduction to the Zodiac Killer as he murders Darlene and Mike at Lover's Lane in Vallejo, California. Both The Empty Man and 2009's Friday the 13th have really long intros that showcase the film's main villain. The Empty Man has a group of friends trapped up in the mountains by a snowstorm, and we watch as an evil spirit slowly possesses them, making them kill one another before the title card appears 22 minutes into the film. Friday the 13th has this hybrid that's part expositional, as a group of friends discuss the history and mythology surrounding Jason Voorhees and Camp Crystal Lake, but then shifts into conflict when Jason suddenly appears and starts killing everyone before the title appears at 23 minutes. These long intros highlighting the main villain almost feel like their own self-contained short stories. Return of the King feels different than the previous examples, but I think it still hits on similar elements of the conflict-focused intro that build up the power and mythology of the antagonistic force. Here we see the power of the One Ring, how it corrupted Smeagol, and now with Frodo in possession of the One Ring, and Gollum serving as their untrustworthy guide to Mordor, we know the difficulties that lie ahead. Now, those are more clearly defined antagonists, but there are still some conflict-focused intros that are more abstract.
His only instinct to destroy everything he touches!
Lilo and Stitch builds up the possible threat of Stitch, or Experiment 626 as they refer to it, as a creature with unparalleled intelligence, strength, but also a propensity to cause chaos, before it escapes to Earth on a collision course with our protagonist Lilo. Inherent Vice opens with private investigator Doc as he's visited by his former girlfriend Shasta, who pleads for his help because she's gotten herself caught up in something dangerous. In Midsommar, we get a glimpse at Dani and Christian's dying relationship before she discovers that her sister killed her parents and then committed suicide through carbon monoxide poisoning, all before the title card appears. And in Vox Lux, a young Celeste manages to survive a school shooting, which will then help her launch her popular music career. Tone is an interesting subcategory of the prologue. These examples I'm about to mention could easily fit into one of the previous subcategories I already brought up. But the reason I put them here in their own subcategory is because I think tone is their primary aspect. Some films have a unique style, they might have a hybrid of genres, or break normal conventions through their use of aesthetic, dialogue, theme, pacing, or structure. With a prologue focused on tone, the director is quickly preparing the audience for what they can expect from the rest of the film. Drive is a perfect example of genre blending. Based on the trailer, you might expect it to be like a Fast and Furious film. From the beginning, you immediately get the sense that this feels like an LA noir heist film, but the added electronic music pulsing underneath, the stylized scorpion jacket, and the long bouts of silence hint at something else. And finally, when the opening credits hit at about 9 minutes into the film, with the 80s style synthwave music and neon pink font, the mash of genres becomes perfectly clear. The Coens have always been chameleons, morphing genres so effortlessly that it's hard to comprehend how the same people managed to make Fargo, The Big Lebowski, The Hudsucker Proxy, True Grit, and Inside Llewyn Davis. With each new film, the audience needs time to reset their expectations and figure out what they're about to get themselves into. Coming off their debut film Blood Simple, a dark neo-noir western, the Coens had a lot of heavy lifting to do in the prologue to their follow-up film, Raising Arizona. The opening 11 minutes tracks the blossoming romance of H.I. McDonough and Ed, the disappointment of them not being able to conceive a child, and the seed of an idea to steal one of the 5 children from the famous Arizona family. The entire prologue is told through this rapid-paced montage with the iconic soundtrack by Carter Burwell that highlights the screwball tone of the film. Spun is a movie about junkies strung out on methamphetamine, and so to get the audience inside the mind of the characters, the film is cut at a rapid, uncomfortable pace that really makes you feel on edge.
Get in here. Hurry up.
At the time of its release, and maybe it's still true today, it held the record for most edits in a movie with 5,000. It quickly sets audience expectations before the title comes in 13 minutes into the film. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Tropical Malady and Uncle Boonmee Who Can Recall His Past Lives, both by director Weera Sethakul, move at a quieter, more meditative pace. The cold open to Easy Rider is used to establish a larger theme of rebellion, as our 2 leads, Wyatt and Billy, are first seen smuggling cocaine, hiding cash, and throwing away their shackles to civilization. before hitting the open road on their motorcycles as Steppenwolf's song The Pusher gives way to Born to Be Wild. Magnolia is another film that uses its prologue in order to establish its larger theme of chance that permeates throughout the rest of the film.
And I am trying to think this was all only a matter of chance.
It opens with 3 stories of freak coincidence in an effort to establish that in this world, these things happen all the time. Quentin Tarantino is known for having a style all his own, and a lot of that has to do with his stylized dialogue that's riddled with pop culture references and a playful back and forth banter reminiscent of screwball comedies from the 30s and 40s.
Want me to shoot this guy? Shit. You shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologize.
The opening to Reservoir Dogs takes a bunch of gangsters, puts them around a table at a diner, and has them talk about meaningless nonsense, like the meaning to Madonna's song Like a Virgin, names in an address book, and tipping etiquette. Pulp Fiction also opens at a diner with a young couple squabbling over the perfect place to rob before settling on the very diner they're currently sitting inside.
Any of you fucking pricks move, and I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
Character, world, conflict, tone. Some directors will establish 1 or maybe 2 of these elements before the title card appears, but I'm not sure anyone jam-packs as much information in such limited time more effectively than Edgar Wright.
Amazing.
In Shaun of the Dead, we're introduced to the main characters, the underlining conflict of Shaun and Liz's failing relationship, the rapid pace of gags.
It's not that I don't like David and Donnie, you know. Guys, it's not that I don't like you.
And as the opening title sequence plays, Wright foreshadows the threat of zombies that will soon run rampant in this world. In The World's End, Wright uses a flashback to establish the main characters, the small town where the pub crawl takes place, and Gary King's delusional state as he's failed to grow up and leave the past behind him. As the 8-bit graphics and retro video game quality music play over the studio logo, we instantly understand the tone of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. We know we're in Canada and that Scott Pilgrim is dating a high schooler. And in Baby Driver, we meet the crew of bank robbers on an opening heist, but more importantly than that, Edgar Wright quickly establishes that inside this world, music is the driving force underneath everything.
Bell bottoms! Bell bottoms!
It pushes the action along as people and items move in rhythm to the beat. The last category of the prologue section that we still need to cover is action. You're probably thinking, but Adam, you've already mentioned Mad Max Fury Road, Baby Driver, Pacific Rim. Those are all action movies. And you're right, they are. But I've been talking about primary function, and action isn't the most important element in those films. I'm talking about tentpoles, summer blockbusters, franchise films. And when there's hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, you gotta give the audience what they want right from the jump. And more often than not, that means a badass action scene to get things started. John Wick 2 doesn't give you a second to breathe before it jumps into an action scene involving hand-to-hand combat, cars, and motorcycles. The Star Trek reboot from 2009 starts with an attack on the Federation ship USS Kelvin and ends with George Kirk's heroic sacrifice so that his crew, including his pregnant wife, can survive. Tenet is one of the rare Nolan films that actually drops the title card in the middle of the movie. In this instance, the protagonist, along with other CIA agents, attempt an extraction at the Kiev Opera House. We get a few foreshadowing glimpses at the type of inverted action that's going to become a big part later. The protagonist is captured and tortured by mercenaries, and after he takes a suicide pill, we cut to the title card at the 9-minute mark. Since its first entry back in 1996, the Mission Impossible franchise has expertly utilized their prologues to establish characters, introduce conflict, but most importantly, they know how to kickstart a movie with the kind of action that instantly grabs the audience's attention. Mission Impossible is probably the quietest entry, leaning heavier on the espionage genre that favored De Palma's style. When John Woo came on for the next film, Mission Impossible 2, the tone drastically shifted. Suddenly, there's an airplane heist with the villains crashing the plane, and then we cut to Ethan Hunt rock climbing and hanging off the side of a mountain. This was only the beginning of highlighting what would eventually become one of the most trademarked aspects of the Mission Impossible series: Tom Cruise doing crazy-ass stunts.
You're gonna tell me where the rabbit's foot is, or she dies.
Mission Impossible 3 is another relatively quiet intro, action-wise, but might also be the tensest moment in the entire franchise because of Tom Cruise and Philip Seymour Hoffman's performances.
No.
10.
And from then on, with Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout, the prologues have struck an excellent balance of introducing villains, conflict, and weaving them with the kind of action the franchise has become known for, with Tom Cruise risking his own life for our enjoyment. Superhero films often use the action prologue to set up their stories. Deadpool 2 is an excellent example, even though it's just a parody of the James Bond films, which I'll get to in a minute. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is an interesting case study on title cards. Near the beginning, a lot of the films used a title card after a cold open. Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Thor, and then the first Avengers film had a lengthy prologue of about 12 minutes, which they needed in order to establish the conflict and high stakes necessary to bring this team of individuals together for the first time. But then, title cards started disappearing in future films. Thor 2 had one, and then perhaps the best use came in The Guardians of the Galaxy, a film that not only used a title card, but an entire title sequence. So many of these films shy away from the title card and sequence, usually just shoving it at the end, but James Gunn really knows how to use that tool to his advantage, helping establish the weird tones that his worlds usually have. Avengers: Age of Ultron has another lengthy intro before its title card appears 12 minutes into the film, and then when Captain America: Civil War hit, there was another shift. The Captain America movies always omitted the title cards for some reason, but here they still didn't include a title card, but in its place they have a prologue followed by the Marvel production logo, which is just bizarre when you think about it. It highlights a focus not on individual creativity and originality from film to film, but on a brand-first mentality. Everything aligning and fitting together with the brand of MCU. And that's a pattern that would continue with future entries. Besides the second Guardians movie, with another great title sequence, Thor: Ragnarok, and the final two Avengers films, Infinity War and Endgame, a lot of films started using the MCU brand intro after the prologue, like Black Panther, Ant-Man 2, and The Eternals. It's disappointing that a unique tool like the title card and sequence, which can offer originality and reinforce tone and everything we've already mentioned, is skipped over for the larger MCU brand. I was honestly shocked when I watched Black Widow and saw that they had an honest-to-God true title sequence 13 minutes into the film. It was refreshing. Not only did it help tell the story, but it offered some originality in a machine that seems happy to just mindlessly slap on another MCU sequence that adds nothing to the film, except to remind you that you're just watching something created by a brand to sell merchandise. Now, if we're talking about action prologues and elaborate title sequences, we of course need to talk about James Bond. There are 25 films in the James Bond franchise. But all you have to do is look at the first film, Dr. No, and the most recent film, No Time to Die, to see just how far the now iconic action cold open and elaborate title sequence has become. Dr. No is the only film in the franchise to not have the action prologue, whereas No Time to Die has by far the longest prologue, coming in at a lengthy 24 minutes. The first prologue came in the second film, From Russia with Love. It's a simple, quiet intro that has James Bond stalked in the night by the film's main villain. And just when you wonder if James Bond is actually dead, There's the twist reveal that this was all just a test for the assassin before the opening credits begin. The third film, Goldfinger, is really more indicative of the Sean Connery prologues. Cloak and dagger, fistfights, femme fatales, silly gadgets, foreign locations, and the occasional cheesy one-liner.
Shocking.
Roger Moore's prologues had more of the spectacle that we're accustomed to now, but they also were all over the place tonally. Some were more serious, like Live and Let Die and For Your Eyes Only, some sillier, like The Man with the Golden Gun, and then whatever the hell this is from A View to Kill. With Pierce Brosnan, the action became bigger and the prologue's length became longer, but the cloak and dagger spy from GoldenEye,
beg your pardon, forgot to knock,
was slowly replaced with a bullet-spraying action star like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone in the movie Die Another Day. Daniel Craig's prologues brought us back to the quieter espionage of Sean Connery with Casino Royale. It was a grittier depiction that felt more raw and real. What's been most interesting about Daniel Craig's Bond is the way they've infused humanity into the character. In Skyfall, we see a Bond that's humbled and brought low. And in No Time to Die, we see real sacrifice and anguish. I haven't mentioned the title sequences because that honestly deserves a video all its own, but from a quick glance, you can see the variety, originality, and all the ways the creatives use the images and music to establish a tone, deliver information, and convey a deeper meaning to the audience before the actual story begins. Alright, so we've covered the prologue title card, how and why it's been used, so now let's shift to the other type, what I call the turn. If the prologue establishes the story, setting up the stage for what's to come, the turn flips the story on its head, sending the narrative in a different direction. An event happens, a choice is made, or maybe it's the truth finally coming out. These are the exciting title cards, the ones that smack you in the face because you don't see them coming. Or they come with the oh shit moment, slamming an exclamation point on an already tense scene in order to add emphasis. In 127 Hours, we follow Aaron Ralston as he goes hiking in Utah's Canyonlands National Park. He makes friends and swims in an underground pool before continuing on. While climbing, a boulder comes loose and traps his right arm against the wall. And as the moment of realization hits him that he's trapped and all alone, the title card appears 17 minutes into the film. In Love Exposure, it's when Yu first meets Yoko and instantly falls in love with her as they work together to fight a group of thugs, when the title appears at a staggering 58 minutes in. And a recent excellent example of this is in the movie Fresh. After a string of failed relationships, Noah meets Steve, who actually seems to be the first decent man she's met in a long time. After sharing a cocktail together at Steve's house, Noah falls to the ground, drugged by Steve. And it's as she's laying on the ground, and the entire tone of the movie has drastically shifted, the title appears 33 minutes in. We already talked about how Drive My Car's title sequence reinforces the narrative shift and the jump in time. It pivots the viewer into a different kind of viewing experience. That's what the turn title card reinforces, that shift that changes everything. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind starts with a blossoming yet somehow off-putting romance between Joel and Clementine. It feels like a normal romantic movie until Elijah Wood's character knocks at the window, asking questions that feel strange and out of place.
What are you doing here?
I'm not really sure what you're asking me.
Oh.
Immediately, we fade to the title sequence where Joel and Clementine have broken up, and Joel's on his way home to get her erased from his mind. The beginning of The Departed is all about setting up the chessboard, putting all the pieces in their place. We follow Colin Sullivan and Billy Costigan Jr. as they both prepare for their positions. Sullivan is groomed to become a mole inside the Massachusetts State Police, and Costigan is groomed to be an undercover operative in Costello's crew. And once the pieces are in place and the game is ready to be played, the title card finally comes in at 18 minutes. Last Life in the Universe introduces us to Kenji and Noe, both with tumultuous relationships with their respective siblings. After Kenji's brother is murdered and Noe's sister is struck by a car and killed, both of them form a tentative friendship, and the title card appears 33 minutes into the film. Climax begins with a professional dance troupe rehearsing in this abandoned school. It's a night of celebration as they're all drinking sangria and dancing together, which is where the incredible title sequence comes in around 45 minutes in. And then everything shifts. A night of celebration turns into a psychological nightmare as the dancers realize that the sangria they've been drinking all night has been spiked with LSD. The members become paranoid, confused, agitated, and start attacking each other, leaving many dead throughout the night. After the title sequence, the slow descent into madness is portrayed with a single 42-minute long take. Like I said in my previous video, late title sequences, long takes, this is the kind of stuff that film lovers drool over. There's another film with a similar structure. Begon's 2018 film Long Day's Journey into Night is broken down into two main parts. Part 1 introduces us to our main character as he returns to his hometown to attend his father's funeral. As he wanders around town, distant memories from his past begin to haunt him. And then in Part 2, he enters a movie theater, puts on a pair of 3D glasses, and then takes the audience on this surrealistic and immersive experience through his dreams and memories. And this second part of the movie is all conveyed through 1 hour-long continuous shot filmed in 3D. And what separates these two sections is the film's title card. The same director, Begon, has another entry on this list with his film Kylie Blues. Chen, an ex-convict now working as a doctor in a rural community, argues with his half-brother, Crazyface, about how he neglects his son. When that son disappears, he's afraid that Crazyface sold him into servitude, and so Chen takes it upon himself to go to a mysterious village to go track him down. My last two examples are some of the latest title cards I could find, and they're both interesting examples for different reasons. With Stalker, we see the title card not once or twice, but 3 times throughout the film. At the very beginning, the picture fades in, and the title sequence begins with the names of the 3 main characters before the title appears. And then more cast and crew are listed before the title appears once more to punctuate the end of the sequence. The film takes place in the distant future, where stalkers lead people through an area called the Zone, where the laws of physics don't apply and remnants of seemingly extraterrestrial activity lie undisturbed among its ruins. Somewhere within the zone is a place called The Room, which apparently grants wishes to anyone who steps inside. But the area of the zone is dangerous, shrouded in secrecy, off limits, and plagued with ominous hazards. After the stalker walks 2 men all the way to the edge of the zone, he wants to stop there, but the men say they won't pay him in full if he abandons them to the dangers of the zone. And so, with fear and trepidation, the stalker agrees to go on ahead. And as they begin to break the invisible barrier of the zone, the title card appears a 3rd time, a delightful hour and 5 minutes into the film. My last example is the latest title card I found in my research, and it comes from the 2018 film Mandy. Now, I mentioned that this is an interesting example like Stalker because in this instance, the movie is broken up into 3 sections, or chapters, that are given on-screen text. The Shadow Mountains, 1983 AD, Children of the New Dawn, and the last section is titled Mandy. Since it's the name of a chapter, I'm not exactly sure if it counts the same, but you can bet that I'm going to count it because it's so incredibly awesome. In the film, Nicolas Cage's character Red Miller and his girlfriend Mandy Bloom live a quiet, secluded life in their cabin near the Shadow Mountains, until an evil religious cult's leader spots Mandy and is struck by her beauty. the cult leader Jeremiah Sand hires a demonic biker gang to kidnap Mandy, but after Mandy mocks and belittles Jeremiah for his god complex, they burn her alive and leave Red for dead. And so after Red chugs a bottle of vodka and processes his grief and rage in a beautiful way that only Nicolas Cage can, he sets out for revenge, but not before reuniting with an old friend and forging a battle axe. Armed and ready to get his revenge, only then does the title finally appear, after an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, I've been talking about title cards and title sequences for way too long, so after everything I've said and gone over, what have we learned? Similar to lighting, camera work, music, and editing, title cards and sequences are just another tool at a filmmaker's disposal. You can either run from them, embarrassed that they exist, or you can embrace them and use them in unique and interesting ways to help tell your story. To give your film originality in a medium controlled more and more by brands focused solely on merchandise. To give your film a voice that's all its own, that smacks the audience in the face and demands that they pay attention to what you have to say. Oh, did I mention that they're completely 100% awesome? Falling under the category of prologue, here's a few films that focus on character. Good Time introduces us to the unique and complicated relationship between brothers Connie and Nick. And The Bad Guys has your classic lineup, introducing all the characters in the crew. There's also Kiki's Delivery Service, and When Marnie Was There, that establishes the main characters and the personal and emotional journeys they're embarking on. Then there's World. Again, the focus here is establishing the rules and dynamics of this unique setting. Ponyo shows us the underwater fantasy elements that will dominate the story. A Quiet Place immediately drops us into this new world where monsters hunt based on sound. The Lion King introduces this African kingdom ruled by hierarchy, or the circle of life with lions on top. And Spencer highlights the Queen's large estate in Norfolk, a place where Princess Diana is easily lost and isolated from the rest of the royal family. Next, we have Conflict. There's Scream 2, the 2004 version of Dawn of the Dead, and Castle in the Sky. All start off with a villain or a nightmarish scenario before their title cards appear on screen, finally launching us into the story. It's hard to find introductions that focus on tone, but if there's any filmmakers with a unique tone and voice of their own, it's certainly the Coen brothers. And they delivered another bizarre movie with biblical undertones in their introduction for A Serious Man. Action is a popular example. Mission Impossible has another entry on the list with Dead Reckoning Part 1. Fallout was the latest title card at 17 minutes, but then Dead Reckoning came in and completely obliterated that mark with a late title card appearing a whopping 29 minutes into the film.
So just how do you plan on getting out of here?
As I mentioned earlier, Marvel has all but done away with unique title cards, replacing them with the generic Marvel intro. It's boring, and I hate it. But then you have two outliers with Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Deadpool Wolverine.
I'm not a man of science, but you seem incredibly passed away.
Even though both aren't particularly late title cards, I thought they were still worth mentioning. Last time I examined the Mission Impossible franchise, James Bond, and Marvel, and so I thought I'd check out the Fast and Furious franchise. I was surprised that only a few opted for the late title card. Fast and Furious, the fourth entry, served almost as a reboot for the franchise, and so it makes sense that they would want to come in out of the gate firing on all cylinders. And it's the perfect example of how to use a late title card after an elaborate action scene. They didn't do it again until Fate of the Furious, and then did it again with the most recent entry, Fast X. Shifting to the final category, the turn, these are the rarest entries, and I could only find 2 examples. First is RRR. This was such a popular example of the late title card when it came out. You could find countless videos online of audiences cheering and losing their absolute minds in the theater when the title card finally popped up on screen. Before it appears, we're introduced in an epic fashion to our 2 main characters, both of which are these gigantic, larger-than-life entities. And when they both finally collide, almost 40 minutes into the movie, the title card appears, and it's epic in every sense of the word. The last example I could find comes from the movie The End of Evangelion. Now, this might be cheating. The End of Evangelion is technically 2 episodes from the series Neon Genesis Evangelion, stitched together with a short break in between. And these 2 episodes were to serve as an alternate ending to the beloved anime series, but so many people categorize this as a movie, and so I will too. The break in between the episodes comes at about 47 minutes into the film. It's bizarre and brilliant because it works in multiple ways. This break in between reinforces the existential themes of the story, life transitioning from one to another, but also placing the title and end credits in the middle reinforced what the entire series sought to do by challenging audience expectations. With the end credits already taken care of, it allowed the story to end with a resounding boom and a fade to black. Thanks everyone for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I think this will be my last time examining late title cards. I think we've fully covered everything. If I did still somehow miss an example, please leave me a comment below. Tell me what I missed. Also leave me a comment below telling me your favorite example of the late title card. Just in some way, if you could, please leave a comment below or like, share, engage with this video somehow. It does do a lot to help appease the algorithm gods and helps motivate them to push this video to more people. Thank you all so much out there for supporting the channel over the years, continuing to reach out. It really does mean a lot. So thank you for that, and until then, I will see you all in the next video.